everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your time. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. So, creation is a communal task. Like, one does not create in a vacuum, right? Marina Garcés is a Catalan philosopher that I really enjoy that says that every creation appeals to a we. What she means by that is every creation is built from a collective identity. And like happens in science, a design never starts from scratch, right? Like we always build from the work of others. So even if you're completely alone in a room, when you shuffle ideas from the past and the present, a profound connection to the collective is established. I like to think of it as a plural consciousness. So plural consciousness is not about reference or inspiration, but about belonging. It's not a conscious choice, but a human need, a human trait. So in a creative context, like this plural consciousness speaks to the interdependence of past, present, and even future ideas, on how ideas freely evolve, just like inspiring one another across time and space, shaping something like a landscape of creative collectivity. So today, I want to talk about collective creativity in the context of Ableton Note, an app for sketching music. So my name is Pablo Sánchez. I'm a principal designer for Ableton. And Ableton is a global company that makes music-making features and tools. So this is Push, for example, a standalone musical instrument with some expressive capabilities. We also build Live, a computer software for creating, composing, and producing music. Then we have Learn, a web environment for learning music fundamentals in a really playful way. So Note is an app for sketching music, and is a place to start ideas, to experiment with sounds and find direction. I am the designer for Note, and it's designed for capturing those moments of inspiration. So we wanted to minimize the friction between the moments that you have an idea and when you jot it down. So its design aims for immediacy, for minimalism, and playfulness. So when designing music-making workflows, you actually have three main approaches to go for. So the first one would be like shaping an always active oscillator, something like a synthesizer. Another one, the second one, would be like adding notes to a grid to create your musical patterns, like a MIDI editor or a step sequencer. And the third one would be pressing and releasing notes, something like playing an instrument. So for Note's first release, we actually decided to focus on the latter. We decided to build a music-making workflow around a set of playable UIs, like digital instruments that can be picked at any time. So sound is intangible, and it's temporary, and it can transform us. So when you're playing an instrument, you're creating moments that they are magical, they are there, but then they are gone. So if you, for example, play a note on a piano, it's gone, unless, of course, you've recorded it. And this is also the source of one of the most stressful things about music making, recording. So normally recording implies a red button that when hit, a countdown will start, and this kind of stress mode will be enabled, and you need to nail your performance in one take. So this has a huge pressure on the performer. And this UI doesn't help, this red dot, everything turning red in the UI. But the truth is that you always have your best performances when you're not recording, right? Those moments when your mind can enter like a blissful state of mind and you just play and all the thoughts recede to the background and only the music is there. We actually wanted to build Note around that concept. We wanted to take out the stress of recording and build upon those moments, capture them. But it was not always that clear. So at the beginning and the early stages of Note, we actually had a recording workflow with all the recording UI conventions. You tap on the red button, a countdown starts, and then this red progress bar happens, and you start to enter in this kind of stress mode. But we used it, and we liked it for a while, but maybe not all of us. So here's the team, and Matthias, that is a Node developer, actually wasn't too happy about it. So at Ableton, every 7 sprints, we have one hack sprint. That means that our colleagues are able to explore different ideas outside of the product regular schedule. So hack sprint arrived, and Matthias decided to developed or hack another widely used recording mechanism in the app, a looper. So if traditional recording involves like pressing the button twice, like one at the beginning of the recording and then a stop one at the end, with Looper, we streamline that process by just requiring the user to press once at the end of the performance or the musical phase, and then immediately it will loop for the first note that you played. Sorry. So this is how the UI works, or worked for the looper. There is a UI, you actually could play some pads, and in the moment that you play it, automatically this loop button would appear. So if you don't like what you played, it will just like fade out, so you don't need to press it. So then that means that all the stress from recording is gone, because it's always recording and never recording at the same time. If you actually liked what you just played, when the button appears, you just hit it in time, and then it will automatically print like the notes of the pattern that you have created. So no recording pressure, which was actually great, right? But then when testing the looper, we observed that many of our users had some issues hitting on the one, which was like a crucial step for this model to work. So hitting on the one means that the user should press the loop button exactly in the moment that they want the musical phase to start. So this creates like an illusion of musical sequence, endless musical sequence. Like, it sounds something like this. So if the user actually pressed the button a bit too early or a bit too late, then the illusion would break. And you would hear something like this. So this was a concern for several of our users, because it was easy for them to just like play a really nice musical phase that they liked, but just at the end of that phase, when hitting the button, they will miss it. So we actually reduced a part of the stress, but then we created another source of stress that was this red button. So this is when Andrew comes to this story. So Andrew Robertson is a Live developer that he actually worked on a feature for Live called Capture MIDI. He created the algorithm for it. So Capture was released with Live 10. And the promise was that Live will remember your ideas even if you haven't pressed record. So the idea is that you can play freely your musical phase, and then at any time you can hit capture, and it will immediately look for the musical phase that makes more sense and loop it and print it on your screen. So let's compare it to our previous methods, right? We have recording. With the recording method, the user needs to press twice, one at the beginning, another one at the end. Then we have the looper that we streamlined that process to just needing one press at the end, but it had to be on time. And then we have capture. There is this new approach where the user can freely play and then can hit capture at any moment in time, and then the algorithm will immediately look for the latest musical phase and just loop it. The truth is that in Live, users could, after capturing something, could just like fine-tune or after edit a bit like the loop that the capture has just given them. But with Node, we didn't want that, right? Because we wanted, it's built for immediacy, so we didn't want any kind of post-editing. So we decided to integrate capture on Node, but do two things. Like first, iterate on the captures UI to align it with the Node's visual language. And the second one, refine the algorithm until no post-editing was needed. So let's start with the visual alignment. So the first thing that we did was no red. We took out red. Red means stress, so it's better without red. Then we just created an expanded view where we could focus on the idea that you were playing. We added some kind of ghost nodes that were for the played notes, but not captured ones. And those nodes were actually outlined so that were a bit lighter than, for example, adding red nodes to it. And then for field nodes, the capture node, would have a field look. For all of these kind of design choices, we have a kind of very effective, I find, design principle that it's called listening over looking. So what does this mean? It means several things. Like, first of all, we do not burden the screen with labels or values, but we just rely on the ears. So if you think of instruments, like classical instruments, like a piano or a guitar, they actually don't have labels, right? Like they have references. So I think that we tend to overpopulate screen-based UIs just because we can do that, right? So more things, like we show exactly what's happening and nothing more. We always display the minimal expression of the sound, always flat, no shadows, no ornaments, and only minimal motion that directly reflects what the user is doing. So you could also think of this principle as the music is the reward, not the UI. Okay, so we covered the visual alignment. Now let's look at how did we refine the algorithm until no post-editing was needed. So this was a quite organic process where we just like shared the app with colleagues from hardware team, live team, and engine team, and we just started to make music with it. We made a lot of music. And then we shared the use cases that failed or could be improved along with ideas for enhancements. We did that in a Slack channel. And Andrew would then grab all this feedback and iterate on the algorithm. And because the team members were actually from different products, they could grab all this feedback and integrate it in their products too. So we finally even created like a capture workgroup to make sure that this was coherent across all the products or platforms. So at the end of this process, we had something that we felt it was shippable, that sounded and felt like this. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's recap. We went from a recording feature that was basically a team effort that enabled the basics for the sketching workflow to a looper that was an individual hack that pointed into an alternative promising direction from recording. And then to capture, that was a collective effort built on a feature legacy that actually retroactively affected other Ableton products. So there is the risk for this talk to sound a bit spontaneous like the Ableton design process, but the truth is that we have a very solid design process. But instead of detailing this kind of formal processes, which actually can be similar across companies, I wanted to share how individual creativity actually shapes this collective identity. Because I feel that that's what makes companies unique, right? Like systems tend to universalize things, like to make them broad, make them general, but then it's individuals actually to make them specific and make them unique. So now sometimes people tell me like, okay, when I meet people, like, are you the designer for Node? I'm like, yes. Okay, so that means that you design Node? I'm like, well, not really. So I'm responsible for the design, but Node was conceived collectively. So it's the interplay between the individual creativity and the collective identity that actually designs Node. And now Oliver Sommerman, a user researcher for Ableton, will tell us more about his experience with this interplay. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So I want to talk a bit more about capture, because to me, as a musician, there's something really magical about it. By removing recording from the equation, it helps me to focus on what feels right to me in that moment, to freely experiment and not worry about where it's going or whether it fits into the song or whatever. And it's incredibly liberating for my creativity. And I think there's something in there that's not specific to music making, but can be generalized as well. So we work on music making products. Our challenge is to turn inspiration into that. So what would it mean to have capture for that? I think one important ingredient is to have time. Just make time to explore your own interests and your own ideas, free from any product development cycle or company objective. Don't force these ideas out, but let them come up organically, share them, talk about them, and discuss them with your colleagues. And then if there's something in there, you hit capture. You start iterating on it, looping, and honing in on the moments that get you excited. In game design, there's a very similar principle, which is often referred to as follow the fun. If you stumble over something in your game that seems to be fun, but it wasn't the main idea of the game, you don't ignore that. You try to find out why it's fun. You try to double down on it and make it even more fun, even if it's not originally planned. This is why at Ableton, a lot of work on product development is actually unplanned. 2 out of every 14 weeks, we are free to hack or learn about anything that we want. And in that time, you can work on a feature like capture, for example, which Pablo mentioned, came out of a hack sprint like this. And now capture is the only recording method that we have in Node. And I would argue it's what makes Node unique. But this kind of autonomy is not just huge for product innovation, it's also huge for personal growth, which brings me to my personal story of what I do in the Node team today. As Pablo mentioned, I'm a user researcher, so I have a very indirect impact on the product. But I had some ideas, so I used some of our hack sprints to come up with something, learn some design tools along the way. The ideas didn't really go anywhere. Then I thought maybe I have more success if I just try to put these ideas into the app directly. So these ideas, again, didn't really go anywhere, but I learned, again, something. I learned something about Swift UI, about our code base, until finally, 1 year ago, I was able to actually build and prototype and actually use a feature that I made, a rather complex feature. There were some cool things about that feature. Also didn't make it into the app. But that's really not the point. Because this moment was really pivotal for me, and it really changed what I do in the Node team today. That's why I want to talk about this feature a little bit. So the basic idea is that you have you type in musical notes similarly to how you would type text on an on-screen keyboard. So you have your drum sounds down here. You're looking at a drum kit. You have some modifiers on the side that kind of similar to a keyboard. Yeah, they modify what happens when you tap the keys. And you have a cursor where notes are inserted and some controls for moving that cursor around. Here's just a short video loop that shows how that looked like in action in the old prototype. It's an old screen recording. So I'm tapping some notes down there, and the notes start appearing at the top. It's an arpeggio in this case, so it goes something like that. And it was cool. I learned a lot, and there were some interesting discussions around that. But as I mentioned, it didn't make it into the app. The information on the screen is quite dense. There's a lot of labels. You have to kind of read a bit to figure out what you want to do. It didn't quite fit our listening overlooking paradigm. But who knows, maybe I iterate on this one in our next design sprint. But back to my personal journey, this was really transformative because I learned that I could build a feature that could land in Node, theoretically at least. I could work not just on user research, but I could work on design, prototyping, engineering, anything. And this was really transformative and really amazing for me because I get to learn new things every day in all of these disciplines and have a super immediate impact on the product. Now, you might wonder, does it make sense to have someone like that on your team? Isn't it better to have people who are super experts in their field that produce amazing results, maybe that no one else can achieve in their field? So is it maybe more worthwhile going deep than going wide? But as with all things, I think that it's worth looking for a middle ground. Because what you're sacrificing or what you're gaining when you have a broad skill set is a lot of agency and autonomy. And if you have an idea, you have also all the tools available to you to realize it, or at least to get it to a point where someone else can kind of understand what the idea is about. And you can maybe test it with users, everyone can use it, you can get excited about it, and then you can decide to hit capture on that idea. And together with your team, polish it up, productionize it, build it for real. Now I want to contrast this for a second with maybe common wisdom, which is that division of labor boost efficiency. So if you have experts in different fields, they produce amazing results, you put them together in the end, and you get something amazing out that maybe none of them could have done by themselves. But this isn't really how I experience our work. My experience is that we build one thing together. We don't bolt together a design, an implementation, a product vision. There's just one thing that comes out in the end. And in this kind of scenario, I find it very valuable if there's overlap between the people on that team, because it means they can support and inspire each other. They can more efficiently communicate. And even people with deep expertise can have more impact, because if everyone does a little bit of design, but one person is a deep expert on the field, then everyone profits from that. And the expert can have an even higher impact than if they were just to work on their own stuff. So back to my personal journey, this is kind of where I arrived now. And I worked on a bunch of stuff that didn't go anywhere, and now I get to have my dream job, I think. And it's amazing for me. And I want to briefly mention 3 things that helped me along this way. One is this, just the time to nurture my ideas and myself. If I didn't have the opportunity to just explore what I was interested in, to work on my own ideas and learn the things that I needed for that along the way, I wouldn't have gotten here, I think. If I had decided 2 years ago, I want to do everything, design, research, prototyping, or whatever, there was no way that was going to work. Or there was no way that I was going to be convinced of that, at least. Secondly, I feel like I have a team that's super generous with their trust and their support. And there's this harmful saying that trust is earned and not given, but I think it's exactly the opposite. It's your decision to trust someone, to invest your time and energy and to help them. And if you give someone that kind of trust, what you earn in return is gratitude. And gratitude, at least for me, is immensely motivating. I don't want my teammates to be disappointed because they sacrificed all their time, but I'm just breaking things, for example. So if you're in a position to give trust to someone like that, I would urge you to try it out and see what you get back. Thirdly, I want to mention AI, that I haven't mentioned so far, but it was actually a great help for me. Not because it does development work for me, but because it's a great tutor. AI, at least today, couldn't build the features that we showed you today. But it was amazing in teaching me the patterns of the programming language, in understanding code snippets and debugging things, and just generally getting to results quickly that I could then try to understand and modify. Okay, so I hope this personal story helped you maybe get a glimpse of how these things, individual creativity and collective consciousness, come together. Because broadening your skills means learning from others. It means creating more overlap with them, a common basis of communication, and a shared consciousness. Giving someone agency means to give them trust and responsibility. It means to make them an equal contributor to your collective output that you identify with. And if you give people time to work on their own ideas and to share them and to build on them together, you don't just create awareness of those ideas, but you create awareness also of the people that have those ideas and what motivates them, what drives them, what they're interested in. And you create an opportunity for them to develop that and to share in that together as a team. And if you have this kind of shared consciousness and mixed with individual creativity, I think you have everything you need to follow the fun together. Thank you very much.